Welcome, everybody, to tonight's episode 3 of Life in the Apex. Again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for tuning into the podcasts after we tape them and make them shareable and viewable. I want to thank Geico Insurance once again for being a good partner and a sponsor for this podcast and for a lot of the other things that we do at the dealership that have to do with the motorcycle community. They have been a partner now with us. We were talking earlier, and I realized it was over 7 years now that Geico Insurance has been a part of the fabric of this dealership and has really helped us make things happen. And especially during COVID and the pandemic, they have been an amazing partner to allow us to continue to do things in the motorcycle community and to help promote things there. I'm really excited about tonight's podcast. I want to introduce Chris Maxwell. He is a local technologist here in Raleigh. We're going to talk about that in a minute. What exactly does that mean? But Chris and I met, it's been about 2 or 3 years ago at the Euro Bike Fest in North Hills. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
And I was walking through there. I knew the live wire was on the horizon, and I was not really sure what that meant for us. And I walk around the corner, and here's this guy with this electric bike talking to he was basically holding court. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. So I stopped. I was one of the people in the audience, and I came away from that 15 minutes completely different than when I walked into that meeting that was happening on the sidewalk there. And I actually walked away from there with some excitement. So I kind of am digging back to those times because now, fast forward 2 years or 3 years, I don't remember how long it was.
3 years.
A lot has happened. A lot has changed. The live wire is here. Chris has done some really cool things in the EV space. And I thought it would be kind of neat to talk about that tonight and to really have a good informational session with the audience out there, both motorcycle and not, because there are probably a lot of EV people out there who don't ride yet. We hope they all will soon.
Oh, yes.
And I thought it'd be interesting to kind of go through some of that stuff. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this. I know it's a little bit late at night, but that's when people tend to have the time to watch. So
it's fine.
I appreciate it a lot.
I'm really honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. So let's talk about technologist.
Okay.
What does that mean?
I'm sure there are a million different variations or meanings, but to me, a technologist is somebody who just has a passion and usually a profession in some form of technology service. So for myself, I work for North Carolina State University. I manage servers effectively. I manage a product called Splunk. It's a data analytics platform. But I couldn't really tell you how to use it that much. I just keep it alive so that the people who know how to use it can use it.
Gotcha.
So I'm just one of the, back behind the curtain monkeys.
Yeah, I've met a lot of people in the EV space, especially in the last year. And that seems to be a lot of the early adopters of that technology and of EV in general that aren't really scared of it.
Yes.
Are in that space professionally. And I think maybe because they kind of have a little insight into some of that maybe the layman or the typical motorcycle rider maybe just doesn't know yet. So
I'd agree with that. A lot of the folks they're definitely in tech, but they're also early adopters. And I know a lot of people who are not technologically savvy, but are still early adopters. Like there are a lot of grandpas in Teslas. I promise you, they don't know what an MP3 is. No offense. I'm sure some do, but and that's, that's sort of the goal is we want to get to the point where, an 85-year-old can have a better experience in this vehicle than they could in a gas vehicle.
Right.
And a lot of that's because they're marrying automated auto driving technologies, assistive technology, stuff like that with the electrics. And I really hope that we'll see some of that trickle down into bikes. Like, I would love to have, I think BMW may have actually said that they're coming out with something like this, but a system where, it's got blind spot detection. Yeah. So it's like, hey, you've got something to your right or to your left. That would be great. Energica, the company that I have a bike from, they had a prototype. It was a prototype, but not a real prototype. It was a render of a 3-screen system that used cameras to give you a 360 field of view. Right in front of you at all times.
Yeah.
And I would love to see stuff like that actually become reality. Because I think that a lot of people would buy something like that and try riding for the first time if they felt that there were some safety nets built in.
Right.
And I know that that's, for some people, that's the whole opposite reason of why you should get a motorcycle, because it's all about the danger. But the danger is there, that, you know, that's inherent. If you can make people a little less afraid of it, then what's wrong with that?
Right. Agreed. How did you get into the EV space, or the scene? Like what made you become an evangelist basically for it?
So the answer to that, in the shortest form possible, is I was very much in the Volkswagen diesel camp. Have a lot of diesel mechanics in my family, so diesel tech was always kind of in the forefront of everyone's mind. And I'm also exceptionally frugal, and anything that got less than 40 miles per gallon was just trash in my book. And you know, our diesels got 40 to 60, so we were kind of you know, when my younger days, I could leave here in my 98 Beetle and drive clear to Little Rock, Arkansas without stopping for fuel or to use the bathroom. Can't do that anymore. But, you know, that was the set goal. So for somebody who prized 810 miles on a tank, to suddenly switch to something that went 60 miles, which is what my first EV did, was kind of a big shift. And it was the diesel scandal that pushed me over. I was I've got a couple VW tattoos, huge VW fan. And that really broke me. And it broke me because my career started at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. So I worked for NIH.
Right.
And I talked a lot of people into these cars because it's the triangle. These people are commuting 30, 40, 50 miles one way to come to work. And they're saving money. And we thought the environment at the same time. And it turns out we were lied to. And I don't take it well when people lie to me. So I was all set to buy a Leaf. I had a rare car. It was a 6-speed gray on black convertible Beetle diesel. Probably the coolest car I think they've ever made. I literally waited my whole life for that car. They sold them in Europe for a long time, but they finally brought them to the States. And it was not a great car. Top leaked. It had a lot of issues, but you love it. You know, it's a brand you love. And so you look over those things. When the scandal broke, I went into denial. And then I went through all the other steps of grieving because I had old coworkers call me up and cuss me out. Why did you sell me this car? I can't believe you would do this. You're a traitor to the mission. And that hurt. It really hurt, which is why I have a hard time backing a brand anymore, because I've already gone through the pain of divorcing a brand. And I'm just kind of gun shy to get back in bed with anybody, you could say. We see that here in the Harley space. It's a similar gusto for sure. Absolutely. And I love that. And that, you know, I love that about the scene. Volkswagen, Harley, Energica, Zero, it doesn't matter who, even Tesla. I love to see that camaraderie. So the car, I was going to buy a Leaf because I wasn't commuting to the park anymore. I drive 6 miles to go to state at this new job. So I'm like, I'm the perfect candidate for an EV now. You know, we can keep an older diesel around for road trips, and I'll have the E for everything else. And I was going to buy a Leaf. My husband's like, absolutely not. Here, there's a smart convertible electric. You should buy one of those. And I'm like, oh, I'll go from one gray convertible to another. That sounds like a grand idea. And that's exactly what I did. I turned the diesel in on Friday, April 1st. It was the greatest April Fool's Day ever. And on Monday, April 4th, we picked up the smart electric in Durham off of a transfer truck. I bought it sight unseen out of a dealer lot in Delaware. And then that Wednesday, April 6th, we drove the little electric car down to Team Power Sports, and we bought a Zero motorcycle for my husband to commute with. Because that was sort of a long-term goal of his, was I want to learn to ride and I want the electric motorcycle. Because he just wanted a commuter appliance because he works at a car dealership, parking is at a premium, and he literally could park it next to the oil tank. And there was an electrical outlet right there to plug it in. It was a match made in heaven. So how's it been going now? It's gotten better every year. So one of the questions, actually a question that came up on Reddit this week was, do you still have a gas car, or when did you go entirely electric? And for me personally, that was May of 2019. That was when I bought the Hyundai Ioniq Electric, and that replaced my BMW i3 range extender, which is effectively a plug-in hybrid, as my road trip car. And over the 16 months that I had that car, I put over 38,000 miles on it.
I think I saw that happen on Facebook or on some social media. I feel like saw that.
I am the only person that we know of who has taken an electric vehicle to all 41 state parks.
You were chronicling that.
I did. Yeah. And that was really fun. I want to repeat that with the motorcycle, actually. Yeah. Particularly, I can't remember the one that's the tallest point in the state. Mount Mitchell, I think Mount it is. Mitchell, yeah. And Singletary Lake is another one of my favorites, actually, out towards the coastal area. Or no, I'm sorry, it's Lake Waccamaw. Yeah, Lake Waccamaw. Singletary is not bad, but Lake Waccamaw, just the entrance to get into the park. Oh, yeah. It's beautiful.
Now, when you're planning a trip like that and you plan these state park stops, it has to be frustrating because the infrastructure can't be there yet.
So the answer is there's infrastructure to make it happen. There's not infrastructure to make it happen conveniently.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is there's plenty of places, there's plenty of level 2 spots. And if you're really bad off, I now know that the big ice machines only draw 5 amps unless they're ramped up. So you can plug into their outlet and charge your motorcycle or your car and not trip the breaker. There's electricity everywhere, but how quickly that electricity flows into the vehicle is the problem. And I'm going to take that moment to pivot into some education.
Yep.
So there are 3 levels to charging. Your first level, think of it as the line that feeds the water dispenser in your refrigerator. Okay. All right. It's a small line. It's very low flow. And that's the house socket in your house. What all your lamps are plugged into, what you charge your phone on. You can plug your car in there. But for our Audi, for instance, it would take like 3.5 days for it to charge from like a single, 5% to 100% would take several days for it to complete. The next level is level 2, which is a dryer outlet. So it's a 240 volt connection. And this is what you see at the grocery store and in public. When we talk about public charging, it is almost always level 2. And there are different amperage levels, but that's largely irrelevant. The thing to think of is this is more like a standard garden hose, all right, in terms of flow. And then your third level is DC fast charging. Now, I should say the first 2 levels are alternating current or AC charging. DC charging, level 3, is actually direct current. So what they do is they take 3 AC phases, combine them together, and then the charging station itself converts that to DC and sends that to the car. The level 1 and level 2 charging, those are actually just very fancy light switches. They're just a cable. The charger is actually in the vehicle itself.
Gotcha.
So when you're charging with the portable cable, or you plug in to a level 2 at a movie theater or hotel, you're charging with the same current that powers your dryer, your stove, your air conditioning system, and the car is doing the work. But when you plug into one of these big fast chargers, which is what the DOT considers to be electric fuel, or these big DC fast chargers, your time comes down to minutes instead of hours. So level 1 was days, level 2 is hours, level 3 is minutes. And the machine does all the work. Literally, your car just presents the battery to the station, and the station does all the work. The car doesn't really do anything. And I'm sorry, what was that?
You're doing the education part.
Yeah, I got the education part out of the way. So there's a lot of level 2 out there. Like the state has, there have been several funding opportunities, Duke settlements, federal grants, state grants, all these different things. So there's a lot of level 2 out there, like places like Star, North Carolina, Hamlet, North Carolina. These have level 2 charging stations. And if you're cool with sitting there for an hour or 2, like I think there's a train museum in Hamlet, you can kill 2 hours there. It's not that bad, as long as it's open and it's not 8 o'clock at night. Not that I have personal experience with that. But it's not bad. So there was a lot of level 2 charging, especially east. We don't have a whole lot of fast charging east of Raleigh. In fact, there's the Harley dealer in Charlotte, Jacksonville, Fayetteville, and Avon out on the Outer Banks. That's it. There's like 4, maybe 5 DC fast chargers east of Raleigh. And that's a real problem because that's the tourist area. Now, for a car like our Audi, which can go over 200 miles, it's no big deal because we can drive straight there and just plug it in at the hotel and it's whatever.
Sure.
But On two-wheel vehicles and three-wheel vehicles, which I think are going to become a thing in the next couple of years, you've got less range. And so that becomes a problem. So I can comfortably say that for the most part, there is some kind of sanctioned EV charger within 50 miles of anywhere you'd really want to go in the state. Whether or not it's going to be fast enough to appease your impatience is the question.
Now, so while we're on that topic, let's talk about that buzzword, range anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that Harley-Davidson mentioned to us early on that we were going to have to address.
Yep.
And it's a real thing. So give us a little understanding on exactly what that means. And not too long ago, you did take a trip to Charlotte on your electric bike and kind of chronicled it. I kind of want to hear how that happened and what you had to do.
So, and that's a good trip to talk about because the Livewire could replicate the trip, like the Energica did, because that particular bike and the Livewire are very comparable spec wise. So the best way I can describe range anxiety is, you're waiting for a very important text message and your phone is at 3%. That level of panic, that's how a lot of people feel when the battery hits 20%.
Yeah.
And the thing to understand is 20% in my smart car, 20% on a Livewire, 20% on my Energica, 20% in my Audi are vastly different amounts of miles remaining. So 20% is not the same 20% across the board.
Right.
And this is why a lot of manufacturers are getting away from even showing a battery percentage. They just show you a fuel gauge like you've known for years because you didn't know whether you had 1.1 gallons left in the tank or whether you had, half a gallon left in the tank. You never cared.
No.
When the needle moved this way, you knew you needed to do something.
Right.
And so it is a thing that exists. But once you get one of these cars and then you actually like run it dead, you realize this really isn't a big deal. I could easily do a 120-mile day with the 60-mile smart car because chances are I'm going somewhere and I can plug it in while I'm there and I'm going to be there for a couple hours. Like if I had meetings, across town, most all of the buildings that I needed to go to, there was a charger within a reasonable walk of where it was. So if I was low, I would plug it in, but I didn't always need to charge it.
Right.
The bigger the battery, the less you end up charging it because it lasts so long. I mean, do you fill your car up every day?
Right.
No, most people don't.
My mom does.
And there are those folks. Trust me. Oh, I know there definitely are those folks who legit will do 200-300 miles in a day. And yeah, that's a challenge even with the best longest range electric car you got today, but it's something you can do. There is enough infrastructure to absolutely make it work.
My mom is so worried that something's going to happen. She always keeps it full just in case she can't get to a gas station.
And there's reason for that. I can recall at least 4 or 5 times where we've had gas shortages in this area in the last decade.
Yeah.
I remember at the height of the economic collapse, I was driving out to Wilson to fill my car up with diesel because it was 58 cents a gallon cheaper.
Wow.
And I only lost 1 gallon of fuel both ways.
Wow.
So it totally made sense to buy 14 gallons of fuel at a cheaper price than what it was in town. I just started doing my grocery shopping out there.
Yeah.
To make the trip worth it.
Which when we were talking before the podcast, that's one of the things I picked up on your conversation is looping these things in of stuff that you already do. You don't even realize it.
Yeah. And that's where it's going to be. Like right now, the gas station, actually, I'll tell you the very first Friday I came home with the smart car, I did what I did every Friday. I pulled into the gas station on Atlantic Avenue by the Bojangles at Six Forks, pulled up at the pump, turned the car off, undid my seatbelt, looked up at him like, oh, yeah, I don't have to do this anymore. Put my seatbelt back on, turned the car on, and went home and plugged it in.
Yeah.
You get so used to, I'm just going to stop at this place because it's on my way somewhere else.
Right.
Well, you're going to do the same thing. It's just instead of going to this sit-go, you're going to plug it in while you're at Target. And effectively, that actually saves you more time.
Right.
Because now the car is doing something while it's sitting idle in the parking lot, and you're inside doing a task that you needed to do anyway.
Right.
Bonus is a lot of times those are princess parking spaces near the front. So you can, you get all of that, assuming that some inconsiderate person hasn't decided to park their vehicle there and prevent you from being able to access the electrons that you need.
That's the same person who takes the handicapped space, unfortunately.
Yes. They kind of are one and the same, and they never put their shopping cart back either.
They don't.
You know who you are.
What other aspects in your life are EV?
Actually, so We only have 2 gas cars left in the house. We have a 68 Volvo, which I've already contacted a company in Greensboro to see about converting it to electric, because I've only ever seen it run and drive one time in the 11 years that I've known the car. And it currently doesn't drive now because of a transmission problem. So, we want to fix it because it's a really cool car. It's, if you don't know, it's a Volvo 1800. It's a big Carmen Ghia, basically. It's a really cool little car. We'd love to take it out. We'd love to show it off, but it never runs. So we're looking at converting it. And then our other car is a new classic. It's a 2000 BMW M Roadster, and it's my husband's car. He's wanted one for a long time, and he's toying with the idea of letting it go and getting a BMW i3 Sport, because he loved our i3 that we had, which I traded in to get the Audi that we have now. And, he drove the Sport, and he talked about that car for 2.5 months. I thought he was going to come home with one. I really did. So I think, and we're gearheads. Like I was saying earlier off camera, we have, I don't know how many bent wheels from various makes, mostly Volvo, under the deck of the house. We still probably have transmissions and axles and other things from various cars. Hell, I've got the shell to an electric smart car clogging up my driveway right now. We're car people, and we're making this move because it just works. It's easier.
Yeah.
There are things you still have to fix. The convertible tops have to be replaced. You still need to put suspension on it. It needs brakes. It's going to have the coolant that runs through the battery pack replaced at some point. It's not maintenance free. It's just less maintenance.
Right.
And the older you get, the more you appreciate that. I get the whole point of pride of cleaning the chain every Saturday and that ritual and stuff. That's not me. And I think a lot of people, that's not them.
It changes when they get older, for sure.
It does. And to talk about electric bikes in particular, I speak to a lot of existing Harley owners in Walmart parking lots, because that's where a lot of the fast chargers are in the state. And they always ask, it's the same 3 questions. There's no clutch. Does it have cruise control? And does it have a reverse? And the answer to all 3 is yes. And they light up. And finally, I looked at a guy one day. I'm like, why? I literally, you're like the 8th person this month who has asked these same questions. Why? And he's like, I don't like to admit it, but I'm getting older and I'm having dexterity problems, and I don't want to give up my passion. And so I think that there's a large base of people who currently ride who want to keep riding, and electric, whether they want to admit it or not, is going to be the technology that allows them to do that. And I'm excited about that. Now, for me, I flipped a bike at 13. I started riding at 11, and my dad rode before I was born, and I flipped once, and that was it. I didn't get back on until I was we were at the North Carolina EV Challenge, which is a really cool program that the schools in the state do, where you build a 3-wheeled trike electric vehicle and then you autocross it. It is really cool. You should check it out. They wanted to have production cars for the spectators to look at, to see that this is not just concept, like these things really exist. So at the time we had the i3, we had my little smart car, and we had the Zero motorcycle. So John rode the Zero over, and it was the same weekend as Tour de Brew, which is the bicycle tour between the breweries. So we threw the bike in the back of the BMW, and I don't know, we shuttled the cars there somehow. We managed to find a way to move three to 4 cars between the 2 of us some way. And he got on the bike and grabbed his backpack, and he somehow took the key to both cars with him. And we still don't know how, but he had the keys to the cars, but the key to the bike was still in the ignition.
Okay.
And so I'm like, well, I need the key to the car. And he's like, well, just hop on the bike. I'm just over here on Maywood Avenue. And, we're at the Joyner Visitor Center. I mean, we're literally like 1.5 miles away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's like, you got your permit. He's like, you've ridden it a few times. You're fine. I'm like, I am in shorts. I am in toe shoes. Like, I am total squid, and I should not be on this thing. He's like, you'll be fine. So I ride over there, and I get my keys, and then I kind of took a really long way back. And then 15 miles later, I take it home and lay it down in the driveway. Little bitty scratch. But I was hooked at that point. I negotiated can we trade cars on Tuesdays? And I get to take the bike to work and you take the car to work, because that's run club night, and it was easier for him to take the car. And that solidified him buying a Smart of his own, because we can't share a vehicle. I think a lot of couples have that problem. And I took over riding the motorcycle full time. And and he had the bike for close to a year at the time I started riding it, and I doubled the mileage on it within 6 months.
Wow.
It only had like 5,000 miles when we traded in. That's not saying much, but when we traded that one in and got the 17, I put 6,500 on it in 9 months. And then I got the Energica and I put 13,000 miles on that one in the year and a half that I owned it. And I've got over 10,000 miles on the bike that I've had for 6 months.
So you're really riding and logging miles on the EV bikes
for multiple reasons. One, I enjoy it. This is a really beautiful state. And I think that if you're not taking the back roads, you're doing it wrong. Although when I want to travel to like Georgia, I definitely want to take the highway and just get there.
Sure.
So that whole like range thing, if you're on the back roads, range isn't such a big deal. When you're on the highway, range really matters.
Yeah.
But also because I just want to put these myths to rest. Like the battery is going to fall flat on its face. No, it's not. How often do you replace the battery in your DeWalt drill?
Right.
If the battery only lasted 6 months, they couldn't sell drills.
Right.
It's all about whether or not it's designed to last. And yes, Nissan's Leaf battery, it's super super anti-fire. It's very hard to make a Leaf battery catch on fire. The trade-off for that safe chemistry is that it wears out really quickly.
Right.
And it wears out even faster in hot environments. So I've killed the battery in a Leaf in 9 months and 300 rapid charges. It failed just inside the 60,000 mile warranty. And that was, we put 30,000 miles on it in 9 months. That's kind of crazy. But for some people here, that's a normal year.
It is. Yep.
Some folks don't realize that, but I average 40,000 miles a year. I've averaged 40,000 miles a year since the day I moved here, and it hasn't slowed down. In fact, I drive more now that it's cheaper to drive than when I had the gas and the diesel cars. So
talk about the planning that you do before any kind of a trip, and how do you even find charging stations?
Great questions. So there are a couple ways to skin that cat. I've become a fan here recently of an application, and there's a website called A Better Route Planner. It's only for certain models of vehicles, Livewire, Energicas, my Audi, Teslas. These are all cars that they have. But you select your vehicle, you put where you're starting, where you're going, you hit go, and it will tell you where to stop, about how long you will stop, and about how much you will pay at that stop.
Okay, that's
and it
cool.
Just does it all automatically for you. And if it can't, and it only looks at fast chargers, so it does not factor in level 2 charging. And so like somebody on the Livewire subreddit was talking about, I want to do a trip from like Seattle to Austin, and they were like, a Better Route Planner gave them a weird error. And I was like, okay, well, you should probably change this setting. And here's what I basically linked them to one that I had plotted with a Livewire. And I'm like, there are a lot of stretches where it says you have to do 40 miles an hour. Use this as a baseline, and then go over to PlugShare and use its trip planner and add level 2 stops. Now, understand you're going to be there for probably 3 or 4 hours, so make it worth your while, but you can supplement and not have to slow down on these legs with slower charging.
Right.
And it didn't sound like they were in a real hurry. This was going to be like, I'm taking a month off and want to do this really long trip.
Sure.
So they have that flexibility. We don't yet... We do technically have the technology that could do a true iron butt 1,000 miles in under 24 hours. The problem is on this coast, we don't have the infrastructure spaced out close enough to make it happen.
Right.
The bike's there, the charging speed's there, the network's not. And we came really close. I think we got to 850 miles before the guy called it quits. And it was because he got to the site and they were both in use. They weren't broken. They were in use.
Right.
And he's like, that's it. I'm done. I don't have the range to go anywhere else. So, PlugShare is my favorite because that's like Gas Buddy. So it's crowdsourced. So stuff that may not, like non-networked chargers, like a lot of the chargers that are at car dealerships are not networked. They're not a Charge Point or a Blink or an EVgo. They don't have an app specific to them that you can check the status on. So those dumb connections, PlugShare is your only way to really know they exist. And
now you can just use those, or...
Sometimes the etiquette gets real interesting. So we have a friend who worked for Volvo, and she said that when she was at the Greenville location, somebody with a Leaf rolled up and plugged into the charger at the front of the store. And it was one of the AeroVironment chargers, the one that Nissan and Ford and most everybody in the early days of EVs, this was the round faced, level 2 charger that they had. And the owner walked over and flipped the breaker to the charger, said she should have asked.
Yeah.
So no, sometimes you can't. I've never been asked to leave a location. But people leave comments on PlugShare about what the experience is like.
Yeah.
In fact, the only time I've ever been accosted at a charger was at the BMW Performance Center, and that's largely because I turned the wrong way and nearly took out a semi-truck. So I'm fairly certain security just wanted to make sure that I wasn't drunk.
Right.
But for the most part, like, I call and ask. I was short on range in Wilmington coming back from Carolina Beach once, and I called Audi because I knew that they sold the e-tron, and if they sell the e-tron, they've got to have a fast charger. And I was like, could I please use it? And they're like, do you have an e-tron? I'm like, no, I've got an electric motorcycle. And the girl was like, hold on a second. She's like, yeah, they want to see this thing. Come on up here.
Yeah.
And so for the most part, they've been really curious. Now, if I was in a Chevy Bolt,
right,
they might have said, no, this is just for our customers.
Right.
So it really depends. I have taken it to the point where I will actually call Harley dealers and make sure they're cool with non-Harley vehicles using their station. And particularly if they're free ones, and there's only a handful that are still in the state, I advocate that they move to a pricing model because I'd like to pay you for the energy that I'm consuming.
Right.
Like it's just fair,
Yep.
You shouldn't have to give this away for free, nor do you have to.
We were free for a little while, and then we monetized it after we started getting really busy.
Yeah. Well, because you fill a need.
Right.
You are the only charger inside the Beltline. I don't know if y'all realize that you're the only fast charger inside the Beltline. Well, take that back. Not anymore. No, because that's outside the Beltline. Yeah, no, the stuff on Glenwood Avenue is outside the Beltline. So yeah, you are the only charging station inside the Beltline. Fast charger. Anyway.
We're excited about it as a shop because we meet a lot of people that typically wouldn't show up at the Harley store, and it sparks conversation. Mm-hmm. And everybody has someone into motorcycling somewhere in their circle.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And so that's what they lean on to be relevant while they're sitting here in their Audi or whatever. And we have met some really cool people that way.
Yeah. I think it's great. Bikers have always kind of had a rough reputation, and all the folks I've met have really been salt of the earth. I really have been surprised by the kindness of bikers and the kindness of strangers when you're on a bike.
Yeah.
Even. So I think it's great that people who might never otherwise engage with a motorcyclist have started doing so because you're providing an amenity that they need. Plus, it's like, oh, well, I really like the car. I always kind of wanted to learn how to ride a motorcycle, but the clutch scared me. And that's always the big one is the clutch. Yep. And I'll admit, like, I've had plenty of my friends, I let them ride my little Zero, and they're like, do you want to ride my whatever? And I'm like, no. And they're like, why? And I'm like, I'm not trying to be snobby. It's not that I think that my product is better than yours. I am afraid that if I stall out and fall over, I am not going to get back on my own bike. And for my own mental health, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I am actually somewhat afraid to ride a gas bike. I have only ever owned manual cars. I rode a dirt bike. I grew up with a three-wheeler. I totally understand how to use the clutch, but I'm afraid that if I have a mishap, I'm going to be so hard on myself that I won't do this. And I enjoy it so much, and it's so good for my mental health. It's the best therapist I've ever had that I just can't chance that.
Right. And it is different. The
different.
riding dynamics are different on an EV bike, and maybe spend a few minutes talking about that, when especially specific to the live wire when you took it out.
Oh yeah. So my most favorite memory of that day was the gentleman, and I don't remember his name, who ran out and was like, don't rev it up. I just looked at it, I was like, I understand, sir. Not my first one. But he was so like, don't rev it. He's like, it's just going to take off. And I'm like, you've obviously seen someone get in trouble.
Yes, we watched videos of it before we got the bikes.
I appreciated that. But I thought that was really funny because I'm so far removed from having a bike with a clutch that it was sort of learning all over again for me. Right. So I didn't have the tics. I wasn't sitting here trying to do this with my left hand or anything like that. I basically learned all over again. And so I just learned how to keep it upright, how to lean, how much throttle to give it. You can dial your regen, which for those of you that don't know what that is, it's engine braking, but it puts power back in the battery while it's doing it. And so you can dial in your engine braking in different levels. And so you can have more or less. So if you're in the city, you can crank it up and then never really touch the brakes to come to a stop. Right. Whereas when you're on a track or the Dragon, you put it down in a lower one so that you coast a little bit more so you can fly through those corners.
Right.
It is great that a lot of the people I've talked to at Harley dealers come out and talk to me while I'm charging my bike. And they're like, I really love the Livewire because it can handle this, this corner on this road way better than whatever their Buell or Harley model that they have. And they're like, I love it. It's just too expensive. So I can't do it now, but I really look forward to when I can have one of these. And that's really great to see people who were skeptical. And then they tried the Kool-Aid and they're like, this is actually really cool.
Right.
Riding or driving truly is believing.
Yeah, we see that constantly at the dealership. When we do a demo event, we see two kinds of customers who come in. We see the customer with the Tesla truck T-shirt on, or some sort of there's clues that they're in the EV space, and they're there to try it because they're intrigued, but they know what to expect and they're excited about it. Yeah. But they're waiting for some of those gaps to get smaller. The price gap is high, and the range gap is still something that they want to get better. And then you have the other customer, which is just a super curious customer. Maybe they were talking junk about it, but they finally sneak away to ride it. And I love the response of that customer when they get back, because that request for torque is immediate. And people love what that feels like.
Torque is fun.
Yeah.
Torque is addictive.
Yep. Very much.
And that's what I love about it. So like when I got to take the Livewire out, we did a video about this. I don't think that it's been posted yet, but I got the chance to take the Livewire down to Carthage and visit the Pick and Pig, which is a very common, if not weekly, group ride. And I'd never been there. I've never really gone that far south before on the bike. So I was like, all right, well, we'll take it. And I stopped and charged it in Moncure at the Jordan Dam Mini Mart. And so that charger is a ChargePoint charger, and that's actually a charger that's owned by the North Carolina Electric Member Cooperative. I forget which specific one, but they're all under the CEMC, right? Or NCEMC. And they are building out an intrastate network of EV chargers just for North Carolina roads. So US 1, 64, 70. These are all roads that they have they've got a website out there. I think it's Drive Electric NC or some EV Drive NC, something like that. But they've got a map of where they intend to build this network out and kind of like the timeline for the phases. And a lot of it is going to be centered around the Volkswagen money that's just now being released. In fact, there are 15 new stations going in just through the EMCs. Hopefully by the end of this year, if not next summer for certain, all across the state. And that's kind of a big deal because like when you look at the ChargePoint fast chargers in 2019, there were 11. In 2020, there were 18. By the end of this year, there's going to be more than 30 of them. Right. That's pretty significant growth. Yeah. And they're spacing them about 50 miles apart. So like you'll have Asheboro, Siler City, and I think Kinston or something like that. I can't remember now, but they're really spacing everything about 50 miles apart because they're designing it to the federal guideline. The federal guideline is you can't put up signage that says that this is an alternative fuel corridor unless you have stations every 50 miles apart. Which is why we don't have signage on any of the corridors, because we don't have any that meet that. Right. We have like 95, for instance. Electrify America has 3 locations along 95. You can very easily traverse 95 with a Livewire from the start of the state to the bottom of the state, no problem. But it's like 60, 70 miles apart. It's just enough to not allow it. So we need to have infill. And that's where the EMCs are trying to come in. They want to see, because the Electrify America is the Volkswagen punishment company. So like they have to build this out. Right. So let's let them spend their money and then we'll infill those gaps. And then we can certify the corridor. And then we'll get the signs that say, there's charging at these exits on this corridor. Right. And I think a lot of people need to see that before they feel like they can make the transition over, whether it's a car or a bike. Right. And we're working on that, like actively. We hope to be able to have a couple of corridors certified by 2025.
Now, who's driving this growth? Is it guys like you? Is it other EV groups? Who's driving that infrastructure build out?
A little of all. So a lot of it is government because, emissions targets for, and we cannot talk about electrics without getting into the environmental aspect, but that is not the reason solely why I am into these cars.
Right.
That said, I am asthmatic, and knowing that the vehicle I was driving was literally cutting years off my life was one of the reasons I'm still kind of scorned at Volkswagen. And it was very big of me to forgive them and buy an Audi. It's literally the Audi is the redemption cycle, and I've so far been happy with them. That said, I'm all about it because it's fun and it's extremely cost effective, and I'm frugal. At the end of the day, I am frugal and I want to spend as little money as possible, but have as much fun as I can. And that it gives me that.
Right.
And so it's people like me who want to go places. And so we're doing things like harassing the people that own the Wegmans shopping center about why they still haven't installed EV chargers. And going to the Pick and Pig and asking those people if they would be willing to install an EV charger,
right.
While taking a Harley-Davidson down there. I will never forget it. 2 Army guys, actually, I parked next to them, and they were at the table near me where I got seated. And when they left, they spent about 15 minutes and took a ton of pictures of it.
Wow.
It was probably the first one they'd ever seen. I almost wanted to, by the time I realized what they were doing, because I had gotten my food and
right.
big boy, I like to eat. I didn't have the chance to go over there and talk to them, but I kind of wanted to get what are your questions? What do you think about this? And I'm sure they wanted to know what I thought about it, which for the record, I love it. The ergonomics, the layout of the controls on this bike are ahead of everybody else. I mean, class leading, whether it's electric or not.
Yeah.
In fact, just perusing Harley's site and seeing some of the advanced riding technology that they have on various model vehicles really sets them apart from many other manufacturers. And I don't think they promote that well enough. I certainly had no idea about some of the braking technology that Harley has on their bikes.
Yep.
And like the whole left and right button for the turn signal, because most bikes have the little combo switch on the left. That's
right.
weird, but it's really great because within 2 turns, I figured out, okay, I'm going to go right, so I need to use this one.
Right.
But then also this side controls the menu system, and this side controls lights and horn and cruise control. And your cruise control button, it's out of a car steering wheel, and it is the greatest thing on earth. I love cruise control. And I have big hands, and I still have to move 2 fingers off of the throttle to reach the set button on my bike. Like, the fit and finish of the Harley really is class leading. Its only problem is it just falls short in charging speeds and range.
Right.
And those are all things that can and will be addressed in time. But for the average person, what it offers really would suffice for their normal needs, because let's be honest, more people trailered their bikes to Sturgis than rode them there.
Yep.
And there was that kid, Jesse, who rode his from Florida all the way there. And boy, did he have some stories about crying in cornfields and unplugging soda machines to charge his bike to be able to get there, because there is no infrastructure.
That's right.
In like the Dakotas or parts of Iowa for that matter.
Right. Yeah. We followed some of that too. And there's another gentleman, Diego, who's a big rider and a big proponent.
He did
Diego Cardonas.
North to south, Mexico to Canada, in California. Yeah. Yeah.
He's a big proponent for EV as well. We are excited as a dealership and as a franchise about EV, and it's a little slow getting started, but I think things like what we're doing today will help get some of those barriers to entry in that scene to break down. And I think people need to try it. They
really do. It's a shame that you only get 10 miles on a standard test drive because it just doesn't do it justice.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. There's only so fast you can get it going on 40.
Right.
And it really is a bike that you want to take it through a sharp corner. You want to romp on it. You want to try some of the different modes, because each mode gives the bike a different personality.
Yep, it does.
And literally with the flick of a finger, you completely change how the bike will respond in a situation.
It's pretty amazing, actually.
It is absolutely amazing. And my initial thoughts, and Casey has probably heard it because I gave her all of the helmet footage, and I talked to myself the whole time. And because there's no road noise,
You can
talking
hear
about
it.
the difference. Yeah, you can hear yourself talk literally. And I was like, it's a zero. It's a grown-up zero. It's what everyone wanted a zero to be. It's got the finesse and the finish and the power, and it's not too much and it's not too little. It's just that the other competitors, which I think kind of did come out of left field, you know, the Europeans or the European, because there's only one company that's doing this, scored better battery deals and was able to put denser batteries out, you know, and they also, one of the things that, and Harley did a great job with the battery engineering. I cannot praise how they got the cells to touch the case and put the fins on to help with cooling, because that was the issue I had with the Zero. I only had it 9 months because I was overheating the battery and it wouldn't charge because it's hot down here.
Right.
And so you have to take that into consideration. And Harley knows that they have to sell bikes in all 50 states, and they're going to see all kinds of crazy environments. And I honestly think that they are the only company that really designed the bike around that, because I love Energica to death, but they built their bike to go on a racetrack. They were shocked, literally shocked, when I told them that my bike is not garaged, that it lives in the elements all day long.
Right.
They just could not imagine.
Yeah.
And I see that the Harley, there are just these little differences where it's like, they did not assume this was going to have a garage.
Correct.
They did not assume this. They did not assume that. And when you've been around for 100 years, you kind of know these things. You know, Energica's got former Ducati engineers at the helm. The parent company has been in Formula One forever. These are racing people, and they build a great race bike. I am literally using a race bike. I am driving a Formula One car because I want to do touring. Right. Because no one makes a touring bike, and touring bikes don't need to go 125. They barely need to go to 100 for that matter. Right. Because it's all about comfort and range and being on there for a long time. No one builds that. I am doing the best I can with the tools that are available today. Yeah. Now, that said, my husband, who, you know, like we would go to Wilmington. That would be about the furthest he would ever willingly ride on a motorcycle. We can buy a live wire and he would be totally content with that. Right. And it would work really well, because between my range and that one, and having owned a bike with that similar range, I know what it can do, and I know where we would stop, and I can make that a weekend trip that would not be annoying. Right. You know, it would actually be fun.
What are some of the myths that are still out there that maybe we can dispel in a few moments to get people to come in and give it a shot?
Well, I mean, the first one is there's nowhere to charge. And the answer is no, there's lots of places to charge. It really is your how patient are you? Right. If you visit a charging station, and I invite you to go to PlugShare, the green pins are slow chargers, the orange ones are fast chargers. Go and hang out at one of these things for a day. Like, hang out there for a couple hours, eat your lunch there one day. See the people who come and use this. A lot of these people are going to pull out a book or a Kindle or their phone or a Game Boy, not Game Boy. What is that thing now? The Nintendo Switch. They're going to pull something out. Hell, Tesla's infotainment screen, they've got an arcade in there. You can buy games and play games using the steering wheel to like do race simulators and stuff. Tesla figured out that charging, there's no way around. You're going to spend more time than you do with gas. Right. We'll get it down to 10 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes, but we're realistically, that's going to be 2030s technology. We're a decade out from it truly being experience parity with gas, but it's going to get there. Right now, the average is 20, maybe 30 minutes to stop on a long trip. And that's in a car. And it's going to be really 40 minutes to an hour on the best of the best electric motorcycles right now. Yeah. And if you're cool with that, and you accept the fact that you're going to ride for 2, maybe 3 hours and then stop for an hour, then it's great. But when you realize that, like, I want to go to Charlotte and I'm planning a weekend, like Convergence Riders, one of the local LGBT riding groups. They do a big ride out of Charlotte every year. It's nothing for a live wire. It's a day trip, it's a half day trip. You can take a live wire to Charlotte and back in a day. It'll take you about 14 hours. Right. Well, and that I say that it was 14 and a half hours the day that I did it, but that also included going to a car lot to look at a smart car and IKEA. And, I did a bunch of other errands, but it was a 14-hour day, but I was still able to leave in the morning and be back in the evening in one day. Right. And that was with 6 charge stops, and each one was between 30 and 40 minutes long. It was doable. Given I'd never done more than, 90 miles in one go,
right.
300 miles in a day. I'd taken the 0 to Myrtle Beach and back, but that was 200 miles one way and 200 miles back. So 400-mile trip, but I left on a Thursday and came back on a Sunday. This was 362 miles in one day.
Right.
And that was a big personal record for me. And it was okay. There were times where I'm like, I just kind of want to get going. Like, can you charge a little faster? And then they updated the software and it did charge faster. But it was not unbearable. But then again, I also didn't have, years and hundreds of miles of experience. I didn't have an expectation. And I think that's the issue is I talk to a lot of people and they have these unrealistic expectations like, well, it needs to go 700 miles. And I'm like, have you been driving a VW diesel? Because there is not a hybrid sold that can go 700 miles on a tank.
Right.
500-600 miles tops. That's the best. And GM's already said that their next round of vehicles will have 400 to 500 miles of range. So I don't, you're moving the goalpost because you don't want to admit that you're wrong.
Correct.
And you're too stubborn to admit that. Is really what it is. But no, there's places to plug in. The range is not an issue today. Realistically, if we're talking about cars that we see here, you don't see a lot of $20,000 cars on the road here. Right. Most of the stuff is going to be 40 grand and up. Right. Jeep Rubicons ain't cheap. And I see a bunch of them around here.
Yep.
So, our Audi was in the 50s as a certified pre-owned vehicle, which was the same cost as this Q5, but my vehicle is bigger and it's $11 to $15 cheaper round trip to DC with it than it is the Q5.
Right.
And it's more powerful than the Q5. It's a win-win scenario. So range isn't an issue. If you're buying something with less than 100 miles of range, then you need to know that you can make that work. But anything with 200 miles or more range, realistically, most people stop every 150 miles anyway.
Sure.
130 miles is the biggest stretch between chargers. Right. So you're going to make a 10-minute stop every 120, 150 miles. I leave here going to DC. I leave my house. I live off US 1. Mm-hmm. I take one up to 85 and I take 85 to 95 and I stop in Richmond for 21 minutes. And then I go up to DC and then I'll hit another charger for 6 minutes. And then I come back there and I charge for another 20 minutes and then I come home. It adds 40 minutes, maybe tops 45 to the entire trip. That's a normal lunch break. When we make this trip, we always stop for lunch. Always.
Right.
And that's a 40-minute ordeal. Well, there's your charging time. You just break it up a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And folks don't think about that. I've driven to Toronto and back in a gas car, 16 hours. It's 14 hours and 45 minutes with charging, it says, with the Audi to go from Raleigh to Toronto. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, that assumes no traffic, which is why it always takes longer than you expect. But
that's an open border.
And an open border. Yeah, that's also true. But, folks, they tend to look at things with rose-colored glasses, for lack of a better way to put it. Mm-hmm. They oversimplify what a trip is really like. We don't have children, but we have plenty of friends and fraternity brothers that do have children. We're great uncles. Mm-hmm. And there is no trip with a child between the age of 0 and 18 that is going to be a 10-minute stop at the Sheetz. It does not exist. Nope. It is a minimum of 20, usually 30 or 40. You're going to get stuck behind the person who can't figure out which lotto ticket they want to buy. Right. There's going to be a line at the kiosk to enter your food. There's going to be a fire in the kitchen, so all the orders are delayed. There's all this crap that people just sort of forget about that always happens on a trip. Doesn't matter what vehicle you're taking. And this is now an opportunity for the car to do its thing. Right. My current crop of vehicles, and to some extent, even the motorcycle too, are so fast at charging that by the time for instance, the Walmart in Richmond, by the time I walk from where those stations are at the back of the parking lot to the one open door because of COVID protocol on the other side of the building, walk to the middle of the building where the bathroom is, use the bathroom, wash my hands, and walk back to the car, I wait 3 minutes for it to be at 80%, and then we get back on the road. Yeah. Like, seriously, I've stopped at that location forever because I do a lot of animal transports, and we always stop at the River City Diner. I like to call it the Shiny Diner because it looks like a Airstream camper. And I've always eaten there. Like this is where we've always stopped on this trip. And the chargers are in the same parking lot. Like there is no change to my habit whatsoever.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to have that.
Right.
You know, but I know a lot of folks who, when they go to Wilmington, they stop at the Mad Boar. It's a real popular place. They've got Tesla and standard chargers.
Are there event like hot rodders go to events? They have these gatherings and they have these different things they do. Is that the case for EV? I noticed your shirt.
Yeah. So glad you did. Yes, that's happening now. So we did the inaugural electric motorcycles at the Dragon last June 23rd. We're doing it again this year on June 23rd. We are on the TOD calendar, so it is out there. We don't have a website yet, but you know, we've got, I think, 10, 12, maybe 15 people signed up for this event already.
Awesome.
We had people from Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, and I think Virginia last year who went. There was, I think, 10 of us total over 3 days. And it was a great time. So yeah, there is that level of camaraderie. On the West Coast, Diego with the Live Wire, Sam with his Energica. I can't remember the names of the other two Energica owners, and I don't know the guy who had the Zero SRF, but they did a mini cannonball run from LA to the Las Vegas sign. And the Energicas took first, second, and third.
Right.
And the Harley came in next, and the Zero was dead last, which was pretty much exactly how I kind of figured it would go. Right. Because the Energicas just have a little bit of an edge on charging speed over the Live Wire. But the Live Wire still did it in a really respectable time.
Yeah.
So on February 5th of this year, we are upping the ante with the East Coast Electric Motorcycle Cannonball.
Very cool.
This is the Key Lime Pie Run. So we're starting in Orlando, and we're going to go down to Key West. And we have the finishing point, it's going to be kind of a scavenger hunt too. The finishing point is getting a picture of you and your bike in front of the southernmost point buoy.
Okay. Man, I bet that bridge is going to be fun on an electric bike.
I've only been to Key West once, and that was in 2016. And we actually took a Jeep with no doors. And I remember how utterly petrified, because I don't like heights. So like this whole mountain riding thing, not my thing. When I rode that C Evo, it was in San Francisco, and he starts going up this bridge, and I'm just like, just look forward, oh my God, just look forward. I don't like heights. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the bridges are going to be a challenge for me, and I'm hoping it's not super windy. Yeah. But I survived the Charahola Skyway, went through a cloud, and we dealt with 30-mile-an-hour gusts. So if I survived that, I think I can handle the bridge.
Oh yeah, you'll be fine. Well, Chris, we're at an hour. Wow. We were going to do 30 minutes, and here we are. This is usually how these things go. So I appreciate everything today. I appreciate all the information. You're going to be a part of our infrastructure here, as you already have been, because of the charging station. I see you out there a lot, and I see you holding court with the guys out front. So you become our friend here with your Energica. And hopefully we'll see you on that Live Wire soon.
It's going to happen. I mean, I can say definitively it's going to happen. It's a matter of timing and when I'm willing to take on more debt.
Yeah,
but it's going to happen.
That's all of us, right? That's a story for all of us.
It's a bike that has stolen my heart, and that's, as somebody who has always said American vehicles are crap, that's kind of a big deal coming from me. Yeah, I could not talk anybody out of it. You know, on paper the Energica makes much more sense, but the Live Wire is just a nicer ride, you know. And then it's not to say the Energica isn't nice; it's comfortable, but the Harley's just a little bit nicer. Yeah,
and you get the passion, and you get all that heritage, and everything that Harley-Davidson is as a company.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, everybody, for tuning in tonight, and thank you to Geico once again for helping us make sure this happens. Thanks to Chris for taking some time to spend with us, and we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks for episode number 4. So thank you very much, and good night.